Okay, so Sonic Generations is probably my favorite 3D Sonic game of all time. It's so good. So, I bet you're thinking I'm gonna give you this totally biased, nostalgia-filled tier list with no depth, just gushing about how good the game is. And yeah, I'll be gushing about this game some because, come on, it's one of my favorite games of all time. We're gonna do a little gushing. But hopefully, I say some things that sound at least sorta smart. Hopefully. Anyway, as usual, this is gonna be in sequential order, so let's get started already. The first level is Green Hill. Bet you haven't heard that one before. As far as first levels go, I'd say this one is pretty good. Act 1 does a great job of teaching you what classic Sonic gameplay is, and it does so without just being a hold right to win simulator. The level is very dense, and little hints are sprinkled throughout the level to make you think, how do I get up there? This really incentivizes replaying the level so you can find all the secret paths and go even faster each time you play. Despite being a first level, there's still a couple of moments of spectacle where the camera zooms out or has you whipping around a mountain. It's great. Act 2 continues this greatness, although this one feels a bit more linear due to the gameplay shift focusing more on the boost. In this level, the shortcuts are less about finding cool new areas and more about outright skipping small sections. It's still pretty good, but I do wish there was a bit more depth to it like we saw in Act 1. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty great first level. I give it a nice A tier. Chemical Plant takes a lot of cues from Green Hill and just expands on them. Right at the beginning of Act 1, you're given a top or bottom path to go down, and this emphasis on quick reflexes to reach alternative routes is kept up throughout the entire level. If you play your cards right, you can avoid touching the water entirely, and that feels great. Waiting for the chemical bubbles does slow down the pace sometimes, as well as getting stuck in the aforementioned water, but the fact that the level is designed for you to improve and avoid these slower sections is what the essence of classic gameplay is, and it's greater for it. I only wish this level wasn't so short. Act 2 further expands on the alternate paths to make this stage feel similarly dense compared to Green Hill's linearity. Like Act 1, right at the beginning you're given the option of multiple paths that take you to separate areas. Ultimately, yeah, it's still a shortcut more than its own path, but it's much more substantial than anything in Green Hill Act 2. Chemical Plant has tons of blink and you'll miss it moments where you go, dang, I messed that up, but instead of punishing you, or worse, dying, you just fall down to a lower path and quickly get back to where you were. The factory exploding around you is a great way to end the level, and even though this one is still a little too short for my taste, it is level 2, so I'll still give it an A. This level's awesome. Sky Sanctuary is a bit slower than the first two levels, but it makes up for it by being the most dense and explorative level in the whole game, at least for classic Sonic. Act 1 has loads of alternate paths, and hot take, I think I might like this one more than the level it's pulling from. Every time you play this level, it feels like you're going down an entirely different path, and this is summed up by the ending revealing that there are 3 entirely separate paths going around this tower. Act 2 has a similar feeling, except for, again, a little bit more linear than Act 1. Unlike the first two zones, the shortcuts here actually feel like I'm exploring different parts of the level, rather than just skipping stuff. While Act 1 feels like the focus is on the outside, there are plenty of moments in Act 2 that have you running through the inside of the temple, and the aesthetic here is very nice. The spectacle isn't as high as Chemical Plant, but playing through this one just feels more fulfilling, so I'm going to give this one an S tier. Metal Sonic has one of the best songs in the whole series, but this boss is a cakewalk, man. I actually had to record this twice, once in a hard mode, just because I beat him before he could actually show off half of his attacks. He has a dash attack, a big lightning attack, one where he hits part of the track at you, and a big dash. All of these have a moment afterwards where you can hit him, except for the lightning attack, which also has one where you can hit him while he's charging up. It's fun, but I like a bit more depth to my boss fights, so I'm just gonna give this one a B. It's pretty good though. The Death Egg Robo is a pretty simple boss. First phase, you just dodge under him and hit him in the butt, and the second phase, you trick him into hitting mines and bonk him on the head. I think what saves this one for me is the presentation. They play with your expectations by having him strictly in a 2D corridor in the first phase while the elevator rises, and then the second phase opens up to show you the earth in the background, and having you run around the boss admittedly feels pretty cool. Really shows off just how big the Robo is. I'm still gonna give it a B tier because again, it's just kinda simple, but it's still pretty fun. So I was initially going to say a lot of the same things as before about Speed Highway Act 1. The level is dense but short. However, I didn't realize just how many alternate paths this stage had. There are a ton. And despite this level taking less than 3 minutes on an average run, I replayed it multiple times and still found little nooks that have no business even existing. Not to mention that the amount of detail in this one stage is insane. From the street signs to the cars that stop for you if you're in the middle of the road and honk at you if you don't move, you can even cause a traffic jam. This is also the first classic level that feels like you're going through a location. You start out in the street before going through a hotel, then you take a helicopter to what feels like a small construction area before ending the level. The ending does feel a little abrupt, since really you're just back at the street again, but the path you take to get there is really fun. I especially appreciate that the hotel has multiple aesthetic layers to go with the multiple paths. A good run through the level has you staying up in the hotel and the offices, but if you mess up, you end up in the parking garage. God, parking here must be a nightmare. So yeah, I really like Act 1 despite its abrupt ending. Act 2 is up to par with the other Act 2s so far. Not as long or as open as Sky Sanctuary, but still dense with plenty of shortcuts and secret paths to find. I still don't know how to get to this boost drink after multiple runs, so yeah, I'd say I'm satisfied with what the stage has going on. While Act 1 feels like you're going through one building, in Act 2 you feel like you're going through the whole city. Running through skyscrapers, taking rockets, being chased by the monkey police, it's a good level, but overall I still wouldn't say it's peak Generations. This one gets another A. Jeez, what is this game, good or something? Anyway, it's time for City Escape, and I know what you're thinking. You're expecting me to say, it's peak, and gush about how amazing this level is. And you'd be correct. This stage is peak! However, it's peak for ways that differentiates itself from every other level in the game. Both of these acts are much more linear than the levels that came before them and are more subtle about the ways they provide choices to the player. For Act 1, the stage starts out normal, plenty of alternate paths that all funnel you into a set piece where the truck completely destroys his family's home. Hopefully Gun paid for the damages. But this truck is the star of the stage. It constantly chases you and destroys the terrain, so not only do you have to make these jumps to get to the higher paths as normal, you have to do it quickly or you're permanently forced to go to the lower ones. The truck also just gives forward momentum to the stage in general. You can see it doing U-turns just to get you, so you always feel like even if you miss the jump, it's probably best to just keep going. And the level ends by giving you speed shoes, so you feel extra cool about getting to the goal and watching the truck collide with the bridge and explode. Act 2 is very faithful to the original City Escape, with you starting off on a board and then platforming in the middle and then escaping the truck at the end. But it expands upon the beginning and end so you aren't mindlessly halting forward. There are a surprising amount of shortcuts for the board section, and although there's not anything too interesting about the middle section, they do a good job making it feel like City Escape. Multiple pieces of iconography are taken directly from the original level, and the truck getting saw blades is both very funny and good for requiring you to actually pay attention to the last chunk of the level. Like I said, it's peak! S tier! Seaside Hill is the water level. No, wait, come back! Seaside Hill is really good and easily on par with the other levels we've talked about so far. Act 1 definitely feels slower than all the other stages, but that's not bad. Like City Escape's linearity, it helps this one feel unique. There are a lot of moments like Sky Sanctuary Act 1 where you can see alternate paths in the background, and usually you can tell exactly how you were supposed to get there for the next run. Other than this weird slowdown moment while going through this loop and the water currents from Hydrosity, there isn't too much going on with this water section. Overall, the level's just pretty good, and the rock chase at the end is a solid way to cap off the level. Act 2 is up there with Sky Sanctuary for being one of the best levels in the game. There are a lot of shortcuts here, and all of them feel rewarding to discover without feeling like you're skipping huge chunks of the level. I love that they bring back the bobsled from Heroes, except now it's a car, and having the loop be a decision between the car and the turtles is also a really fun way to incorporate both into the level without making it feel too bloated. Ending with all of the rocks rolling around that you have to avoid is a cool way to recontextualize them instead of just having another chase like at the end of Act 1, or City Escape for that matter. From the amazing visuals, man I love how the water looks, to the fantastic level design, this one's gotta go in S tier. It's basically perfect. Also, the Act 2 song remixes both Seaside Hill and Ocean Palace, and that rules. Also, one other thing, this is the level that was basically replacing Green Hill for a while when they didn't want to use it for whatever reason. So the fact that this doesn't feel like Green Hill, even though it was meant to be Green Hill's like replacement, it's just good. It's just good. The Shadow Battle is okay. Don't get me wrong, this is better than the original fight in SA2, but it really just is boosting until the game decides to give you the glowy orb twice, then you win. Most of the time I don't even feel like I'm fighting Shadow, I'm just running around the arc until he shows up on my screen like, I'm the coolest. The music is good though, and overall it's still fun, so I guess I'll give it a B. But one thing the original does have over this one is that Shadow actually attacks you. I mean, he can if he gets the orbs, but like, most of this is just you holding boost. Perfect Chaos is honestly pretty good. Like every boss up to this point, it goes by quickly, which is extra disappointing when you get to the final phase and the music changes, but it's cool to see Chaos again, and the fact that you're taking on a supersonic boss as normal Sonic and winning is, well, cool. You could say that this boss is more like its own small level rather than feeling like an outright boss fight, but seeing Chaos in the back throwing attacks at you at least keeps his presence in your mind. But yeah, this is more style over substance. Also, falling in the water can't just kill you, but I don't know, I'm not made of stone, I'm still putting this in A tier. This is my ranking. Crisis City feels like an apology for Sonic 06. This level is a huge jump in difficulty from the first 6 stages, and you know what? Good. Things were feeling a bit too cozy before this. I wouldn't even say this level is outright hard, it's just the most punishing level in a relatively easy game. I'll repeat myself and say that Act 1 has plenty of depth and paths to find, as well as some moments of spectacle to balance things out. And I like the gimmick near the end of the level where they pull the fake out with the goalpost and you have to go through a tornado section before finally getting to the end. It's awesome. Act 2 is my actual favorite level in the game. This is a stage I've played so many times trying to get the perfect path because dodging obstacles and taking the fastest path just feels so good. This level really shows that they can design levels that are challenging without feeling frustrating. There's nothing cheap here, which makes getting a perfect run feel fantastic. It truly is incredible that they took the least polished game and gave it the most polished stage. S tier. Man, I love Rooftop Run, but for the exact opposite reasons of Crisis City. This level is just a really good time. Visually, it has undoubtedly changed the least from the original, since it's literally the exact same engine, but the balloons and confetti everywhere makes it feel a bit more lively than the original. Act 1 starts off by showing off. Where some games will have a run-of-the-mill background, Rooftop Run will show you the entire section of the level you're about to get to as window dressing. And unlike a level like Seaside Hill, which uses obvious tools to get you there, in Rooftop Run, it's totally seamless. They were so confident with this, and it's awesome. Act 1 has a few references to the night stage too, with the barrel section and the more fleshed out clock tower climb, and ending it by destroying the flying fortress at the top is pretty cool. Act 2 feels like a greatest hits version of the original, which makes it feel more consistently fun, but it's also easier and shorter than the level that inspires it, which is kind of a bummer. However, it makes up for it by having similar design sensibilities to the rest of Sonic Generations, having plenty of choices to make prior to big set pieces, and similar to Cityscape, they expand on the final section by including the flying ship from Act 1. Overall, I'd say this one's also an S tier. I almost put it in A because of how short Act 2 is, but does it really need extra if what we have is already perfect? Planet Wisp is... Planet Wisp is... It's complicated. Buckle in, this is going to be a long one. This level isn't bad, but it's undoubtedly the worst in the game for a couple of reasons that aren't exclusive to one particular act. First, this level completely misses what makes the Wisps and Sonic colors enjoyable. In colors, for the most part, the Wisps are optional power-ups to open up new paths. Simply making them mandatory already dampens the entire experience of Planet Wisp. But if this is all they did, they'd be manageable. Unfortunately, they also created new gimmicks tied to the Wisps that slow down the game further. In Act 1, you have the focus on the pink Wisp, which lets you roll along walls. They also added some pink blocks that can be destroyed by the Wisp, which are fine. But then they add these gears on top of that are just not great. The worst part is simply how much they rely on this thing. So much that I wouldn't blame you if you thought the Act 1 theme was just the Spike Wisp thing instead of this really good Planet Wisp remix. Act 2 isn't as bad since the only thing they added were these rocket panels, but the problem with these is that they just feel slow to go through. They even showed near the end that they could have just broken apart, but they chose to have the slow breaking animation play every time. This sounds small, but you're going to be seeing this a lot, and if you replay the level, you're going to be seeing this a lot. And it's not like there's a fail state, it just takes up your time. The other issue with both of these acts is that the openings are both really good, possibly the best in the game. First off, Planet Wisp is just a beautiful location. This can't be ignored because the factory part is definitely not as good. In both acts, the opening feels just as good as the rest of the game. Plenty of paths and shortcuts that feel good to discover, all while looking at some gorgeous visuals. But then Eggman's mug shows up and the stage just falls off a cliff. Act 1 meanders thanks to the pink Wisp, and Act 2 is pretty much 2D from here on out, except for one quick step section. This is faithful to Planet Wisp in colors, but part of the appeal of Generations is spicing things up like this. That said, for 2D boost gameplay, this isn't bad, since the rocket allows you to find some extra paths and design your own route. Planet Wisp really shows how important spectacle is to Sonic. The best Sonic stages have a good combination of style and substance. They tell a story with their level design, showing Sonic starting in one place and ending in another. Planet Wisp does do this, but without any of the flair in either act. In Act 1, you enter a factory and leave. There's really nothing else going on, and the visuals in the factory leave a lot to be desired. You can show a Sonic fan a screenshot of Green Hill Act 1 in Sonic 1, and they'd be able to tell you exactly where you are in the level. But you show them a screenshot of Classic Sonic and a pink spike ball breaking boxes, and that could be any number of sections in this level. At least Act 2 does have the tower section, but they don't do a great job showing off the way they do in other levels, thanks to the camera being locked to 2D. All the momentum you feel in a level like Green Hill Act 1, Sky Sanctuary Act 1, Speed Highway Act 1, I can go on, but none of that is here. And yeah, you could say that's superficial, and if anything, you might even say the dynamic presentation in parts of the other levels forces the designs of these sections to be shallow. But these are important to the flow of the level, and their absence is felt in this incredibly long, for this game, 2D section of a play style that is supposed to be mostly 3D. I love Planet Wisp, I'm glad it was the level that was chosen for Generations, but I gotta give this one a C, like the bottom of C. It's still not bad, it's just clear that it's the weakest level in the game. Silver the Hedgehog is the best boss in the game, I'm sorry. Like Crisis City, this feels like an apology for Sonic 06. He goes from the worst boss in the entire franchise to the best rival battle period and the best boss in the game. His attacks make sense as soon as you realize you can homing attack the cars, and there aren't too many rings, so you can't just spam the boost to win. He uses plenty of attacks and the terrain to force you to constantly pay attention, and he has a final attack that, while it can kill you instantly if you stop running, is a manageable change. Still gonna put him in A tier, but A tier for a Sonic boss is incredibly good. Egg Dragoon is fine. The boss has the exact opposite problem of every boss in the game. It just takes too long. There are a lot of parts in this fight where you're basically just waiting your turn, and if you mess up, you have to keep waiting. The final section being a skydiving section would probably feel cooler if this wasn't an attack that he could get mid-fight as well. This one's a C tier. It's not offensive, but it's not something I'd want to go back and play. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, you rodent. I already am subscribed, and I hit the bell to be notified of every upload. He didn't even tell me to smash the like button. Alright, before we talk about the final boss, we gotta talk about the Casino Night pinball table. Honestly, it's pretty good. This surprised me because I just wrote it off as a cheap little add-on, but it has a lot of little paths that go up that lead to a slot machine at the very top. I'm not gonna say it compares to a full level, but I did have fun with it, and I did play it for a surprising amount of time. Be sure to play as Classic Sonic though, because he can spin dash to change his direction. Modern Sonic just has a boost, which doesn't really help all that much. B tier. Now that's what I call smashing the like button. Uh-oh. Alright, it's time to talk about the time meter. This is a boss where you hold boost until you get close enough to continue holding boost. All the while, the other characters are in the background screaming a cacophony of voice lines at you while warning you about things you can very obviously see are happening. And even though you can see all those attacks coming, you can't see the rings coming, making this boss extra tedious. D tier. Not very good. Okay, yeah, it kinda sucks that the game ends on a low note, but with how many amazing stages are crammed into this game, I can accept that. Plus, it let me see Classic Robotnik again, and his design is great. Will Sonic and Shadow Generations be good? I have high hopes, and I'm looking forward to ranking all of those levels once the game comes out. Anyway, listen to the Eggmen, subscribe to the channel to see more. This has been the Ranking Zone. Catch you later. Are you sure you said to leave a comment on the video? What? You were the one who was supposed to say to leave a comment on the video. Well, I know it was one of us, so shut up and keep plugging.